important place. They are the bridge between the ACs and the Nigerian public. They tell the story. Is how the media portrays us that the public take course. So if they are able to take the positive message to the people, they will help galvanize the populace within the fight against corruption. But if you have a media that are not operating at the same wavelength with the anti-corruption agency, we continue to have problems. If you have a media that is deficient in terms of integrity, we continue to have problems. If you have a media that is sold out to the corrupt, we cannot succeed in this fight. So we need the media to come on board if we are going to.
Major facilitator of this workshop that talks about the media and the anti-corruption agencies and the fight against corruption. What was it meant to achieve?
Well, basically, number one is to educate the media, because they need to be immersed, to be well immersed, to be familiar with the mandates of the anti-corruption agencies, to know their limitations, to know their constraints, and of course, not that they don't know their role, but basically want them to be on board of the fight against corruption in Nigeria. And of course, we have seen visible gaps between what the anti-corruption agencies are doing vis-a-vis the roles of the media. So I want a situation where there will be trust building between the anti-corruption agencies and the media, where there will be partnership, because at the end of the day, both the media and the anti-corruption agencies are working in the common interest of the public. So I want a situation where there can be a kind of partnership, because you can't fight corruption successfully without the role of the media. The role of the media is so crucial in this. That is why we're coming together for these 2 days in Calabar to make sure that the media are abreast of development, what the issues are, what can we do, where do we go next? That is the essence of our coming together.
Yes, that is one area that affects us here on the scale, and that is the job we have been doing. How effective it is, it's left for you to decide. And it is a running battle that the media must continue to fight alongside government, particularly this government that makes it a cardinal program to fight corruption. And this workshop has helped to re-energize the knowledge of media practitioners along with non-governmental organizations and prosecutory organizations on how to prosecute the fight against corruption. Thank you for being part of this program. And other issues continue to crop up. We will not miss on them, particularly when it concerns the justice sector. See you again.
Information is power. Everyone wants power. So feel powerful with the NTA News mobile app, the one-stop information center. Real news at your fingertip. Be the first to report by uploading first-hand information on the U-Report link, and be the first to know by simply clicking on any of the links on the sidebar for headlines, domestic and foreign news, economy, security, politics, sports, and more. Stream live on your smartphone and tablets and stay connected. It's pretty easy. Simply download NTA News app from your Google Play Store and you're good to go. NTA News mobile app, your access to real-time information.
NTA Language.
Jama'a masu kallon labaran NTA Hausa barkanmu da warhaka. Ni ne
Ekukale lo de yin yan wise kude de ya.
Igbo murum kachano.
Broadcasting in the language you understand better. Our programs. Transmitting on the Star Times platform 24 hours.
Àwọn onímọ̀ nípa ètò ẹ̀kọ́ lórílẹ̀‐èdè Nàìjíríà.
Hukumar tara kudaden haraji ta ƙasa.
Ala anyị na ọchịchị mba United Arab Emirates UAE.
The only channel that speaks your language.
Anyị ga-eweta akụkọ gbasara ọrịa ahụ nke wakporo obodo anyị.
Kálejì, mo kọ́kùnrin, mo kóbìnrin, mo kí ọmọdé, mo sì kí àgbàlagbà.
Mu yi kokari mu sauke nauyin alƙawarin da muka ɗauka.
Ẹ kú lẹ́yìn tèmi, ẹ káàbọ̀ sórí ètò wa ètò yín ètò obìnrin tó dángájá.
Wa ya fi cancanta a ɗauka a matsayin ɗan aikin cikin gida.
Jama'a masu kallon tashar NTA Hausa, barkamu da warhaka.
Kí ni ayẹyẹ ọdún iléyá tá máa ń ṣe lọ́dọọdún yìí rọ̀ mọ́?
NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Imagine a station where you access information. Think of a station that creates awareness for national development. Imagine a station that prepares you for a bright and greater future. A station for all ages. Documentaries, classroom and television, events coverage, children's programs and variety shows. Always stay tuned to NTA Knowledge on the Star Times platform. Channel 359. For partnership, sponsorship and advert placements, contact us on NTA Knowledge. NTA Knowledge, learning to broaden horizon.
Federal government vows to bring Boko Haram leaders to justice.
Senate steps down confirmation of nominees as resident electoral commissioners in protest against continuous stay of EFCC acting chairman.
Central Bank of Nigeria further crashes the dollar. Direct road the showing to sell at 362 naira to the dollar.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on the oversight powers of the legislature.
Now, the democratic interplay in Nigeria in recent times has again drawn the attention of many to the country's democratic practice, which some analysts say has continued to improve.
Well, that's to be expected, Blessing. Having had nearly 18 years of uninterrupted democratic governance, it is natural for the system to improve, with the citizens and institutions getting better from the experience.
Quite right, Kingsley. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria provides for 3 arms of government, that's the executive, legislature, as well as the judiciary, not only for the separation of powers, but also as a mechanism for checks and balances in the exercise of their powers.
Now, much as the judiciary plays an important role in interpreting the laws and settling disputes between the other 2 arms of government, as well as between the government and citizens, it is in fact the executive and the legislature that you get to hear most of the time with regard to squabbles. This, of course, obviously on account of the roles that they play in the country's democracy.
Now, the legislature in modern democratic societies actually perform basically three conventional functions of representation, lawmaking, and their oversight responsibilities.
Now, the oversight function of the legislature as provided for in the Constitution is to enhance accountability, transparency, and probity in the conduct of public affairs, with particular reference to the management of public resources.
Now, these powers of oversight of the legislature in Nigeria finds legislative importance in Section 88, subsections 1A, B, as well as 2A, B of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended. This function is adjudged to be the most routine and engaging activity of any legislative institution.
Now, in spite of the importance of legislative oversight in contemporary democratic governance, it has been somewhat controversial and has remained a major source of friction between the executive and legislature.
Well, Kingsley, recent developments in that regard have dominated the news and discourse across the country. And how do we begin the legislature's exercise its powers? How do we begin to make them exercise their actual powers? Are the legislative powers actually respected by the other arms of government? All this and some other questions as we move on in our discussion today. We'll take a look at the oversight powers of the legislature on our program today. Good morning, Nigeria. We welcome you to the program, and this is showing live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA. My name is Blessing Abu.
That's right. I'm Kingsley Osadola. I join Blessing also welcoming you to this edition of the program. Quite clearly, in spite of the constitutional provisions with regard to legislative oversight and the experience that the country has had in the Fourth Republic since 1999, when do we have instances of legislative overreach? And then when we also have instances of executive apparent obstinacy or lack of cooperation with the legislature. These are the issues, as my colleague has indicated, that our guests will be taking a look at today to see, look, how do we enhance democracy, having the three arms of government functioning either independently and or interdependently. Once again, we welcome you to this edition of the program, in the course of which we have our regular companion segments, including newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, of course, we're going over to the newsroom, and our caster this morning is Laurie Bala Hassan. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, Kingsley. Good morning and welcome to the news. The federal government has vowed to ensure that the leader of the Boko Haram terrorist group, Abubakar Shekau, is arrested to face justice no matter what it takes. The Minister of Defense, Mansour Dang Ali, stated this while speaking to newsmen after an audience with President Muhammadu Buhari.
If you have had the opportunity to go to Sambisa, you will know that the Boko Haram have been defeated. We have opened up the place. We are using the place as a training area whereby the army engineers will open roads, who shall be patrolling and be ransacking that forest for the whereabouts of Shekau. It's just a matter of time. It took America about 7 to 10 years to get Bin Laden, so we'll get Shekau as soon as possible.
The ongoing 2017 Nigerian Army Small Arms Championship holding in Sambisa Forest has demystified the dreaded forest. Guests and participants said this at the week-long event.
This year's Nigerian Army Small Arms Championship is conducted here in the Sambisa Forest in order to exploit and consolidate on the gains achieved so far in the Northeast operations.
Let me first appreciate the members of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for finding it deemed or necessary to turn a 60-kilometer square forest into a training area. This has never been done.
By this bold and creative decision to hold the Nigerian Army Small Arms Championship right here in the heart of the Sambisa Forest, I do not have the slightest doubt that the pace of the Sambisa, the notorious Sambisa, is totally sealed.
And away from security matters, Senate has stepped down for 2 weeks the President's request for the confirmation of 27 persons for appointment as resident electoral commissioners. That the decision followed an objection raised by Senator Peter Nwabushi in protest to the continued stay in office by the EFCC acting chairman.
Issues like this have to transcend the issue of political parties or where you are believing, but for the interest of Nigerians.
The preparation for the conduct of 2019 election is the submission of resident electoral commissioners to the Senate for screening and approval.
These resident electoral commissioners just appointed, I'm aware that some of them, those positions have been vacant for over a year.
And still staying with the legislature, the House of Representatives has passed for second reading a bill for an act to amend the Electoral Act 2010. The bill seeks, among other issues, to provide that in event of death of a presidential or governorship candidate, the running mate shall replace the late candidate.
Making the card reader the credible means of voters' accreditation and voting.
Any attempt to introduce a card reader into our electoral act, we will vehemently oppose it on this floor.
We must see to the fight of electoral corruption, and card reader, under all circumstances, must have to be protected.
Card reader has no place in voting. It's used for accreditation.
A candidate of a political party for president or governorship died. That his deputy should step in to conclude the election. Executive arm, in its wisdom, has even set up an electoral reform committee. What is being done today should serve as a wake-up call for that.
The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, has described the interplay between members of the executive and legislative arms of government as an indispensable element of the democratic process, with potential positive spin-off effect on the oil and gas industry in the country. This was in a message by the Group Managing Director, NNPC, Dr. Mekan Tibaru, to the Executive Intelligence Management course of the Institute for Security Studies, Buhari in Abuja.
In appreciation of the importance of the National Assembly to our operations, a full department headed by a general manager is dedicated to managing the relationship between the NNPC and the legislature.
The GMD said the NNPC is currently collaborating with the legislature and other industry stakeholders to ensure the passage of the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. PIGB is also referred to as the Petroleum Industry Bill. Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, says its attention has been drawn to the recent reports that it has suspended 202 staff indicted by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. A statement from the Commission's secretary reveals that the information is incorrect, as the Commission is still in the process of investigating the allegation and interviewing all staff concerned, in accordance with the principle of public hearing, while promising to make its decision public on the conclusion of the process. The statement adds that in line with INEC staff conditions of service, no disciplinary action can be taken until the conclusion of the process. Barely 24 hours after its directive to deposit money banks in the country to sell foreign exchange obtained from it to retail end users at not more than 360 naira to the dollar, the Central Bank of Nigeria has crushed the rate at which it sells forex to Bureau de Change in Nigeria to 360 and directed them to sell to end users at not more than 362 naira to the dollar. The CBN Acting Director of Corporate Communications, Isaac Okorafo, who confirmed the directive in Abuja, disclosed that the CBN, under the new policy, will sell forex to the licensed Bureau de Change at the rate of 360 naira to the dollar, while they will in turn sell to customers at a rate not more than 362 naira to the dollar. Mr. Okorafo said the objective of the new forex sale policy is to ensure a convergence of the rates in the interbank and Bureau de Change, stressing that the CBN remains committed to ensuring transparency in the market as well as fairness to end users. many of who hitherto experienced challenges in accessing foreign exchange. And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Blessing and Kingsley shortly after the break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
When I came into the school, that was 3 years ago.
The roofings weren't good.
We managed classes.
Our machines weren't working.
Most of us will come to school with our own seats.
Until 2015, some of the machines are now working. We have electricity in the school.
The same building, housing, library, and the computer, that's ICT, was completely renovated.
We are not comfortable in our classes now.
During the construction, there was a borehole sunk that helped the builders in the building. And so the school is enjoying that borehole now.
This is the new Imo State, where education is free. The Imo Rescue Mission. Imo must be better.
What makes a Niger mom powerful?
I encourage my kids to learn new things. And if they get hurt, I rely on the power of my Dettol's One Capful. To fight germs, it's like my own first aid kit.
My family needs protection from germs. I use the power of Dettol's One Capful to disinfect surfaces and clothes to keep them clean and safe from germs.
I trust the power of Dettol's One Capful for bathing. The power of Dettol's One Capful protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Millions of powerful Niger moms use the power of Dettol's One Capful to protect their families. Be a powerful Niger mom with Dettol. Be 100% sure.
The program is Good Morning Nigerian, and the central bank pegs the dollar at 362 naira for sale to the public by operators of the parallel market. Business News is up next with Leah Katumba Batunde.
Barely 24 hours after his directive to deposit money banks, DMBs in the country to sell foreign exchange obtained from it to retail end users at not more than 360 naira per dollar for invisibles, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, on Tuesday, March 28, crashed the rate at which it sells forex to borrow the change BDCs in Nigeria to 360 naira and directed the BDCs to sell to end users at not more than 362 naira. The CBN Acting Director of Corporate Communications, Axiko Kroafo, confirmed the directive in Abuja on Tuesday. He said the objective of the new forex sale policy was to ensure convergence of the rates in the interbank and BDC, stressing that the CBN remained committed to ensuring transparency in the market as well as fairness to end users, many of who hitherto experienced challenges in accessing foreign exchange. He therefore urged licensed BDCs to play by the rule, cautioning that the CBN would not hesitate in sanctioning any erring dealer. Meanwhile, the CBN spokesman also disclosed to newsmen that a sum of $100 million offered to authorized forex dealers in the interbank wholesale window to meet the requests of genuine wholesale customers was fully subscribed at the auction this Tuesday. Okorafor also reiterated his call to all stakeholders to play their respective roles in ensuring a smooth running of the foreign exchange market for the benefit of the Nigerian economy. Stocks on the floor of the Nigerian stock market on Tuesday made a reversal of minimal gains made at the opening of the week to see the all-share index record a decline of 0.31%. Next is a graphic summary. With rising demand for precious stones in the international market, what is the role of Nigerian miners in meeting the yearnings of these viable markets? The Rector, Nigerian Institute of Mining and Geosciences, Dr. Umar Bamali, spoke with NTA Business News in Abuja on the opportunities that abound in the mineral sector, especially through value addition as a way for improving the marketability of stones locally sourced.
If this is about 5 grams, if you cut and polish, it will be around 2 grams. If you are supposed to sell this at 5,000, by the time you cut and polish, it can go for 10,000, 20,000. And you can see that you create employment in the country. And you are even transferring technology, because by the time we have more of this equipment and people are trained on that, and they can be able even to manufacture some of these equipments.
And finally, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, says an estimated 1 million people in South Sudan are on the brink of starvation. Last month, famine was declared in parts of South Sudan. In a well stage, children and their families are facing a hunger crisis at emergency and critical levels. Over 270,000 children are estimated to be severely malnourished. These children are 9 times more likely to die than a child who is not malnourished. UNICEF said it is carrying out programmatic interventions at the community level, which include providing treatment to address severe malnutrition, as well as clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. UNICEF said it aims to reach over 200,000 children who are severely malnourished across the country in 2017. With Business News, I'm Lekatung Babatunde.
Thank you very much, dear Leah Katung Babatunde, for the business package. Next for us now, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Bayatoye B is ready, and let's take a look at the review this morning. Good morning to you, Bayo.
I'm said blessing. Good morning, Kingsley, and good morning, Nigeria. Let's go.
All right, Bayo, pleasure to have you join us today. Now let's begin by taking a look at the front page of the Daily Sun. Of course, there are some stories that are common to some of the front pages of the papers that we have this morning. Right, from top to bottom, just an earpiece beside the nameplate says Boko Haram, that's the kicker. Shekau alive, but we're on his trail. That's according to the defense minister. Details of the story can be found on page 9. The lead story, of course, has a double-decker headline. Magu must go. Senate insists and gives Buhari 2 weeks to fire EFCC chair. And below that, of course, you have a double caption for the photograph on the front page, how to deal with corruption monster, Tinubu and Oshibajo. Governors and dignitaries honor APC chieftain on 65th birthday. Of course, that took place. That event took place in Lagos yesterday. And you can see the number of dignitaries there, including the Vice President, the Minister of Interior, who stood in for the President, and others. Now, tax evasion. Federal government to go after billionaires and millionaires. Details on page 12. States' debts hit 3.32 trillion naira, says federal government. Details on page 2. And Senate denies spending 298 million naira on bulletproof vehicle. I didn't collect money from Jonathan. That's according to Bishop Kuka. Details on page 9. Listen.
Okay. Some of the stories I've taken already are still trending on front pages of the two papers I have as well. The authority starts with that. Just above the nameplate for the authority, Shekau still alive in Sambisa Forest. It's coming from the Defense Minister. You find our story on page 4. And on page 4 too, you find the story will no longer tolerate herdsmen's attacks. It's coming from Afenifere. Leading for the authority this morning, Magu Senate refuses to screen 27 INEC commissioners with 2 riders, gives Buhari ultimatum to decide EFCC boss fate, admits buying bulletproof SUV for 62.5 million naira. For the photograph you have there, Senator Dino Melaye Middle appears in academic gown at the National Assembly to douse fears about his certificate yesterday. Senators begin quest for release of Nnamdi Kanu Dasuki. That story starts right there but continues on page 2. Still on the Senate, not confirming the INEC Rex, you have the story just below the nameplate for the Daily Trust. Senate dumps Rex confirmation over Magu. Discordant tunes over 6 geopolitical zones. That's the story leading for the Daily Trust this morning. Okay, there are other stories, but Bayo?
Yes.
Let's take a look at this one.
Well, we are told that Shekau is alive. That is official, coming from the Minister of Defense. However, we've not been told which of the Shekaus. There's the first Shekau, the second Shekau. The Shekau seems to have many lives. In fact, when journalists pressed the Minister of Defense, he drew a parallel and said Bin Laden was haunted between 7 to 10 years before he was tracked down, that the military is still on the trail of Shekau. Now, coming back to the Senate yesterday stepped down the proposal from the presidency confirming 27 resident electoral commissioners. In the motion moved by Senator Peter Nwaoboshi, he prayed that the confirmation be stood down as the Senate is being denigrated by the executive. Cautioned by Senator Ailero that without confirmation of resident electoral commissioners, INEC would not be able to conduct the 2019 election was not heeded. In the melee, the Senate President and Deputy Senate President advised that rather the confirmation be stood down for 2 weeks. This is to enable the leadership of the Senate consult with the President. However, at the House of Representatives, it was business as usual. They passed for a second reading a bill that was making 4 amendments to the Electoral Act of 2010. One was the use of card readers for elections. The second was the death of a presidential or gubernatorial candidate before polls result. And as you recall, what happened in the Kogi election. And also the inclusion of diaspora voters in voting. The fourth was about party expenditure. However, arguments developed along party lines. There were those who contended that the card reader has disenfranchised voters. Others argued that the card reader had actually tracked and eliminated electoral corruption. Meanwhile, the Speaker, Yakubu Dogara, has given 30th of March as deadline for all committee chairmen and deputy chairmen to turn in their reports on the appropriation. He said that this is to enable the appropriation committees complete work on the 2017 appropriation bill. Saying any committee that fails to meet the deadline will face consequences.
All right. Well, Baya, there are other stories that where we also talked about the appearance of Dino Melaye in the Senate.
Well,
in the Senate
I'm curious.
yesterday.
The picture I am seeing does not reflect the academic gown of the Ahmadu Bello University. I don't know whether it is the academic gown of another university. However, the other contention in the Senate has authority to confirm, and when you have authority to confirm, like you said, you also have authority to oversight. But do you have authority to sack, to remove from office?
Well, unless that is expressly provided for in the enabling statute, yes. But just to return to Dino Melaye and the comedy of him appearing in the academic gown, he had a gown there on the mortarboard. Could that also be an abuse or misuse of academic gowns? Academic gowns are for special occasions, special events. Either there's a special lecture to be delivered, or it's a Founders Day or matriculation if you are entering or if you are graduating. You also have that, but the dress is not, from what we can see, that well, of course, it's complete. Yes, you have all the 3 items in there. You have the gown, then you have the sash, and then you have the mortarboard.
But if I must add to that,
yes.
there is a dress code for the National Assembly members at the House of Rep and the Senate, and I don't think academic gown is part of it.
Well, that's the comedy that he introduced yesterday. So, Senator Dino Melaye, they say, graduated as Daniel Jonah Melaye from ABU. All right, now let's return to the other front pages. Leadership newspaper is next for us. I already read a story from The Sun, but it's also here for Leadership newspaper. It says federal government will go after entrepreneurs and others over tax evasion. This is attributed to the Minister of Finance. And then how I went from being jobless to owning 3 different businesses. The stories can be read in greater detail on pages 6 and 7. And Bayo already discussed the transactions on the floor of the House of Reps yesterday. 2019, Reps divided over use of card reader, empowers running mates to succeed candidates in event of death, and Dogara gives House committees deadline on 2017 budget report. But of course, this story, Bayo, has to be considered along with what is going on at the moment. That's to say the Kenan Namani Committee, which is going around the 6 geopolitical zones, collating views on electoral reform. Sometimes, we to and fro on these matters. And you also have the recommendations of other committees that remain pending. All right, we also have another headline there. It says Nigeria to save 1.52 trillion annually by reducing importation of software. And then PDP crisis, NJC absolves Justice Abang of wrongdoing. That's on page 10. And we didn't expropriate NNPC products, MRS.
Okay, for the front page of the Daily Trust, you'll find at the foot of the page, water scarcity hits Kano as residents resort to boreholes. You find the page on page 6. 23,000 ghost enrollees uncovered is from NHIS. World Bank debates $150 million, and the federal government is requesting for, that is what the federal government requesting for mining sector. But there is a worrisome story I'd like to point out, but it's on the inside page. That's page 5 of Daily Trust. Okay, let's see if we can get that. Nigerian students attacked in India. Nigerian students attacked in India. It's too soon after the South African incidents and some other parts of the world where people are. Students being attacked here and there. Indian police have arrested 5 men after an attack on Nigerian students in Greater Noida. That's in India. The story is right there on the screen. Okay, Bayo, I think.
Talking about the students that were attacked, actually they were arrested on suspicion that a 17-year-old boy had died, and there was suspicion that it was from drug overdose, and those Nigerians were the suspect. But the police, after investigating, because one Sujda Singh, who is the superintendent of police in charge, said they found no evidence about the Nigerians. Because they were released, a mob of about 300 descended on them, and they were attacking them. And that is when why they came under attack. But meanwhile, the police said they have arrested 5 of the attackers, and they are on the trail of the others. The other report that I like to draw attention to was a driver in Zamfara who was driving and also engaged in a telephone conversation. He eventually lost control, swerved, and ran into a head-on collision with another oncoming vehicle. At the same spot, the 2 drivers of the 2 vehicles died with 2 other passengers. 5 others were injured and taken to hospital. The passengers in the car had cautioned the driver to either park or stop the telephone conversation, but he refused.
Yeah, but that's unfortunate. That's one of the hazards of using the phone while you are driving. I mean, that's how much time is it going to say? Is it going to cost you if you were to pull over and continue with your conversation?
1 second off your driving.
We just want
to actually
a momentary loss of concentration is what often results on this. Let's close by taking a look at some of the headlines from the Nation newspaper. Just above the nameplate, very quickly, you see that there are Afenifere to police, hold Hausa suspects. And then he said no crisis, sorry, I can't get that now. Sorry, Ife crisis not caused by Yorubas alone. Dangote, that's the kicker, 62,000 jobs on the way. And then, of course, you also have the other headline there about going from being jobless to having a number of businesses. And Buhari hails outstanding politician Tinubu. at 65. So those are the headlines we'll take immediately from the Nation newspaper. And Bayo, I would like to thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
See you tomorrow. All right, so that does it for our headlines review this morning. We'll take a short break now.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. So let the change begin from within. Look at you, Ogeruola. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
Coming up, we visit David Daniele. In the 10 months since he appeared on Airtel Touching Lives, his Center for Citizens with Disabilities has gone from strength to strength.
Thank you, Airtel. We are glad that you came.
And for Emmanuel Onyeka, his dream of completing his studies has been dashed. A tragic Okada accident in 2015 had left him an amputee.
Touching lives. Savlon leaves you free to live more and do more. And it's formulated by Johnson & Johnson to kill over 99.9% of germs on skin.
Okay, sir. You may now go in for your interview.
Thank you. Ah, my shoe. And to think I just bought this very expensive foreign shoe 2 months ago.
So sorry about your shoes. This is why I advise my friends to always patronize made in Nigeria products. See this shoe. It's made in Nigeria and I've had it for 2 years and it's still as good as the day I bought it.
Made in Nigeria products are good quality, and stringent government regulations and certification now mean the goods made in Nigeria meet international standards. Make the patriotic choice today. Buy right. Buy Made in Nigeria.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Well, take this background report as part of our discussion, actually to kickstart our discussion, taking a look at oversight powers of the legislature from Omotola Omojola.
The National Assembly, as an arm of government in democracy, has been vested with a number of duties and responsibilities which aim at promoting good governance, security and welfare of the nation. Apart from making laws, the legislature is also saddled with the responsibility of oversight of other arms of government for effecting good governance to the citizenry. This is distinct from the executive and the judiciary, in line with the constitutional and democratic principles of separation of powers. The Nigerian legislature, which is bicameral in nature, provides for representation of people from various constituencies and senatorial districts across the country and is supposed to speak the voice of Nigerians at the grassroots. The power of oversight which the legislature exercises to ensure transparency, accountability and check mismanagement has in recent times pitched the legislature against the executive arm and has not only been in the news but also subject of discourse across the country. The legislature has had altercation with the executive and judiciary on certain issues that has caused the public to take sides either with the legislature or the other arms of government, depending on which.
The long absence of this vital arm of government in the administration of the country as a result of prolonged military rule seemed to have created the impression among some Nigerians that the nation could do without it. This is often noticed when the National Assembly has financial issues that interest the public. The court of public opinion has supported and condemned the National Assembly at different times to the extent that it appears favorable to the public. Those who know, however, say the legislature remains the symbol of democracy as it is the only arm absent in dictatorship. Representation, lawmaking and oversight, which are the three basic functions of the legislature, they argue are only tenable in a democratic setting. But then, how does the Nigerian legislature exercise its powers? Are the legislators overusing their powers? Are the other arms of government disrespecting the legislative powers? Where do legislative powers begin and end? Join us on Good Morning Nigeria as experts provide insight to this.
All right, thank you very much there, Mojola, for that background report. Of course, we have guests with us here in the Abuja studios as well as some of our network centers to join in this conversation on the role of the legislature with regard to its oversight powers. First, we would like to, at this time, welcome the Deputy Senate Leader, is Senator Bala Ibn Nala. Distinguished Senator, a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, viewers.
All right. And then we also have with us here in the studios Professor Maxwell Gidado. He's of the Faculty of Law at Nasarawa State University. Professor Gidado, pleasure to have you join us.
Good morning,
And also with us here in the Abuja studios is the former General Secretary of the Nigerian Bar Association, Federal Family Affairs on Good Morning Nigeria, Mazi Afam Osigwe. Mazi, a pleasure for having you today on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. All right.
All right, so since you've indicated we're going outside Abuja, we'll start off with a guest who is in Benin. He's a public affairs analyst. We'd like to welcome Dr. Osawaru Okunzua. Good morning to you, Doc.
Glad to be with you.
Okay. All right, so those are the guests we're having in the meantime to kickstart this conversation. Let's begin with the incumbent Deputy Senate Leader, that's Senator Ibn Nala. Senator Nala, there are oftentimes questions of issues arising from the oversight functions of the National Assembly, you know, even say at the state level, where you have the State House of Assembly. So in general, we're discussing the oversight powers of the legislature. How does the legislature, in your opinion, conceive of its powers of oversight?
Well, for you to appreciate the conception of the legislature as it relates to its powers relating to oversight, first you must accept the fact that oversight itself, as a word, is not a constitutional provision. What we have is the provision of Section 88 and 89 of the 1999 Constitution as altered. And what does it say? I think I have Professor Gidado as this iPad. Can I have the provision so that we read it and then you understand specifically what it says?
Well, I'll help you. This powers of oversight of the legislature in Nigeria finds legislative importance in Section 88.
Yes, and 89.
Subsections 1A, B, and also 2A, B of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. Yeah. The function is adjudged to be the most routine. At least that is what we have.
Let us first of all look at the words used, the intendiment of the words, so that you can understand whether the legislature is within the envelope of what is anticipated by these provisions of the Constitution. Now it says, subject to the provision of the Constitution, each House of the National Assembly shall have power, by resolution published in its journal or in the official gazette of the government of the Federation, to direct or cause to be directed an investigation into any matter or thing with respect to which it has power to make laws. What it means is that in exercising this power, the National Assembly is going to look at the exclusive legislative list and then the concurrent list, where it derives its power to make laws. Then B says, the conduct of affairs of any person, authority, ministry, or government department charged or intended to be charged with the duty of the responsibility for A, executing or administering laws enacted by the National Assembly, and B, disbursing or administering monies appropriated or to be appropriated by the National Assembly. Now, if you look at the combined effect of this provision and then the necessary intendment and how it is done in other jurisdictions, and I will situate NTA, for example, as a government institution and give you what it is. Now, assuming last year NTA decides to budget 1 billion, in it there are some line items that say we have to change our cameras to digital or whatever. And then we provide money, let's say, for 8 digital cameras. What this provision requires us to do is say, okay, you have provided money, go and check. Have those cameras been bought? For example, as at the time you are appropriating the money, the cost of each unit of the camera may be, let's say, 15 million. But as at the time the money is going to be disbursed to NTA, it might be less than 15 or over 15, since we do not have fixed rate. So these are the issues that the National Assembly is supposed to come on oversight and confirm. For example, if we come on oversight and you say that, well, we were only able to buy 6 out of the 5 provided because when the budget was proposed, the unit cost is 15 million. Now we have discovered that it's about 17 million due to fluctuating. That is understandable. Then the National Assembly will say, okay, there has not been wastage of public money. It is true that this has been done, and therefore we will make provision for another camera in next year's budget. That is how the oversight came about. The oversight means come and see how the money you have appropriated is being used by the government or ministry or department to which you have made those appropriations. That is how it is done.
That is with regard to expenditure of public funds.
Yes.
There are other issues you raised just now while you were reading the relevant section. So how does that work out?
About what?
Does it relate to the performance of a public office?
Exactly, yes.
And what are the issues that could propel you or prompt you to undertake a supervision, or let's say legislative supervision of such an office or an officer? Okay,
don't forget that every member of the parliament is an elected member. So it is not unusual to have written complaints, maybe by way of petition sent to the Senate President or whatever, and then it will be directed to the relevant committee. For example, if somebody in NTA decides to write to the Senate President and say that the provision you have made for buying cameras, instead of buying the digital cameras, they only went and changed something and then left it like that, and the money is taken.
Not NTA, by the way.
No, I'm just giving you, I'm practicalizing what it is. Right. So what it means is that the relevant committee, that is Committee on Communication, will now be directed to come to NTA and see whether this is true. Because the whole idea is to save money for the public, the taxpayers' money. Save it so that in such a way that it is being used efficiently, you know, for the purpose of.
All right, distinguished Senator, we'll come back to you, but still, I mean, the example you just gave now still relates to public expenditure of public funds,
yes.
You know, rather than the performance of the actual function. I mean, assuming there is something going on haphazardly with regard to a public authority, that could also be a cause for that.
Exactly.
But let's bring in Professor Maxwell Gidado into this. We're still looking at, you know, the conception of the oversight function of the legislature. From what, you know, Senator Nala is saying, there is a sense in which, from what he's just explained, it might be construed that the National Assembly or the legislature also serves an auditing function. Could that be correct?
Yes. First of all, let me start by saying that the legislature in Nigeria in particular is one arm of government that is the most misunderstood by Nigerians. And secondly, it is also the arm out of the 3 arms that has the most stunted growth. And the reason is not far-fetched. Now, Nigerians have always, over the years, been used to the executive and the legislature, particularly under the prolonged military administration. So when there's a democratic government in place, they don't actually get to grips with what this legislative arm are out, to come to do. And the Constitution is very clear. As a matter of fact, what many Nigerians don't know is that the 1999 Constitution arrogates over 114 powers to the National Assembly, ranging from the principal duty of National Assembly, or the legislature, which is to make laws for peace, order, and good governance, of the entire nation. And aside from that, issues such as budget, which is the most important. The executive cannot expend a dime, one kobo, without the legislature appropriating and giving them that power to do so. They can't even raise tax. You can't execute fines. You can't fine. You can't carry out whatever it is that is included in the budget without that budget passing through the National Assembly or the state assemblies, as the case may be, and approval granted for the legislature to carry it out. So when you look at all this, you now dovetail it with the oversight functions. That oversight functions, as the learned distinguished senator has said, the word oversight is not stated there, but oversight means supervision. Simply, it means monitoring. The wordings of any law that is passed by a legislature sometimes can be vague. It can be misunderstood. Hence, the legislators are the ones that know the intent of most of these laws that they enacted, because they're the ones that make these laws. The executive executes. The judiciary comes in when only there's any conflict for them to interpret. Hence, they know what led to which provisions of the Constitution or which provisions of the law they've enacted states. So the Constitution gives them that power under Section 88, as we've read out, to come occasionally to supervise, to monitor, and to find out, are these laws that we've enacted, are they being replicated on ground in accordance with legislative intent, in accordance with the spirit, most importantly, the spirit and letter of the Constitution. So this can either apply to a public officer, the way a public officer carries his duties. If he doesn't do them in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, in accordance with the provisions of the law establishing that his office, he can be oversighted, he can be supervised, he can be monitored with a view to bring him in line. And they also investigate and receive petitions. So you have to know the powers of the National Assembly. It's not just to sit down and enact laws. It is stated there in black and white. It is a constitutional provision that gives them these powers to occasionally go out and find out whether, because supposing they appropriate monies and they sit down throughout the year in the National Assembly or in the presence of the state assemblies without going out to find out how these laws or these monies they've appropriated are being carried out. There will come a time an executive will just sit on the money, or they may even misappropriate, misuse it, divert it, to something that wasn't even contemplated. How would you know that? And before you know it, the year has run out. So it behoves them to go out, and they are covered by the provisions of the Constitution. Go out and find out whether these laws that you've passed are being implemented the way they're supposed to, the monies you've appropriated. Like issue of tax, if FIRS decides to impose tax that is unwholesome, that it's not in the interest of Nigerians, and Nigerians are crying, they are, mark you, representatives of the people. So when there's any disquiet, people will run to them. My honorable member, my senator, we are in pains. These very laws you people passed is hitting us. Now, it behoves them to go back and meet FIRS. I mean, how are you people taxing people? I mean, double taxation, or the tax is too high, and it behoves them to invite such a person, come to the house, summon them. They have powers to invite you to come to the house, or they will visit you and find out how you are carrying on these very duties that has been assigned to you by the law. But most importantly, it must be in tandem with the provisions of the ground norm, i.e. the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Maxwell Gidadu. Now, before we get to the other two guests pose their questions, we would like to welcome at this point from our Lagos studio another guest, former Speaker, Lagos State House of Assembly, former Senate Deputy Leader, and also Ambassador Designate. Senator Olorunimbe Mamora would like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria today.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm not an ambassador designate, just point of correction.
Very much for that, sir. Okay, well, let's take off from you, Sil, before we get to the other guests that were already introduced. Yes, let's take a look at the central ethos actually determining the operations of this institution of the National Assembly. Yes, we've started off trying to see the kind of powers the powers of oversight that the National Assembly actually wields. What's your own perspective?
Well, thank you very much. I think so much has been said by earlier speakers on this issue. I would just want to say that when you look at the powers of the legislature, the National Assembly, specifically in this instance, we are not just looking at expressed powers, because there are three types of powers. You're looking at express powers, that is, those ones that are specifically stated in the Constitution, like, of course, power to conduct investigation, like you have under Section 88, as has been said, power as to matter of evidence in Section 89 of the Constitution, of course, power of confirmation, or what is called legitimizing power, because there are appointments made by the executive, by the president in this instance, that will not take effect until such confirmation is made, like appointment of ministers, appointment of ambassadorial, people, and then, of course, a confirmation of appointment of judges, namely, so many like that, legitimizing powers. Again, you also have what we call implied powers. That is, powers that are as a result of extension, if you like, of the provision, one of which has been mentioned, even creation of taxes, yes, is a power vested in the National Assembly. Of course, you have this power of arrest. Ordinarily, it's not the duty of the National Assembly to arrest, but again, is power vested by implied power vested in National Assembly that can compel attendance. Then, of course, you also have what we call the assumed power. That is, a situation where the National Assembly needs to come in to fill a lacuna in the Constitution. For example, the other day when I was then in the Senate, when we had to, make it possible for the then acting president to become, the president. And we had to go through what we call then the doctrine of necessity. It's not that's only the Constitution, but we had to find a way around to create, what we call the doctrine of necessity and make it possible as a Senate then, because National Assembly as a whole, we needed to just come in to rescue the nation from that crisis, as it were, period. Of course, you also recall that following the expiration of the tenure of the local government chairman, I think that was in 2002, and new election had not been held throughout the country. And the Constitution under Section 7 is clear that you only have democratically elected, and the tenure had expired, new ones had not been elected. So we had to create, that was how caretaker committees came into being. There's no provision for caretaker committees in the Constitution, but we had to come in to again rescue. So those are the various powers that are there. And I quite agree with my colleague, one of the earlier speakers, who did say that the legislature is not just the most misunderstood, is the most misrepresented, is the most misconstrued arm of government. And of course, it's also a function of our political evolution, where most of the time, of course, each time the military came into power, the legislature is under, lock and key. So that's a reality. So, but we need I think what we are going through is a passing phase, and we will get better with time.
All right, distinguished Senator Mamora, thank you very much there for your response. Again, we still have Dr. Sawaro Kunzwa at Benin Network Center and still with us here in the Abuja studios, Mazi Afam Osigwe, former NBA Secretary General. Gentlemen, in general, we talked about the nature of the powers of the National Assembly as well as the scope of such powers, including what is embedded in the oversight activities of the legislature. But let's gradually shift away now from the constitutionalization of power. But if you wish to still speak to that, that's fine. But one of the knotty issues that, of course, we'll be delving into right away has to do with what has also been conceived as legislative overreach. At what time, in the course of exercising the various forms and nature of powers that the guests have already talked about, could it be seen that, look, the legislature is overreaching itself and therefore creating tension with the other arm or arms of government? Mazi Afam Osigwe.
Now, my take on this will be very simple. The moment the legislature veers off from the aspects, from the powers given to it under the Constitution to question or to investigate matters not within the contemplation of the Constitution, then it would be overreaching itself. For example, the powers given to the the legislature under Section 881 of the Constitution is qualified by Section 882, which limits it to investigating matters dealing with amendment of laws or making of laws or trying to cure defects in laws. And then it goes further to also say that the investigative powers of National Assembly can extend to investigation of corruption, waste, and inefficiency in government. Now, if it goes beyond this to question government policy, for example, FIRS just announced that it intends to go into a drive to get more tax. If the National Assembly wants to question this avowed intention by the FIRS to increase the tax base of the nation by making sure more people pay tax, people do not avoid taxes, the National Assembly will then be overreaching itself. But if there are allegations of corruption in a parastatal or an organ of government or an arm of government by a ministry, or waste or inefficiency in its running, or the National Assembly wants to investigate whether a particular law is meeting the expectations of Nigeria, then the National Assembly would be exercising its powers very well. Also, it can exercise the power under Section 65(7) of the Constitution by inviting a minister to ask questions about the running of the ministry. In that regard, you cannot question its powers. But if it veers off into questioning policies of government, which policies are founded on laws made by the National Assembly, and which that ministry or parastatal organ of government is merely trying to implement, and where there's no allegation of corruption inherent in that policy, then the National Assembly would be overreaching itself, and in that kind of situation, it will no longer be a legitimate exercise of power, of oversight by the legislature. But the legislature would then be said to have overstepped its bounds, and in that kind of situation, the bias or the ability or the power of the legislature to so do comes into question. And in that situation, people will be right in saying, hey, wait there, you can't do this. And this is where we'll have problems. Whether the National Assembly can go into just about everything because it has investigative powers. These powers are not at large. They are qualified by the Constitution, and the legislature will do itself a world of good by limiting itself to the circumstances permitted by law for the exercise of this power.
All right, Mazi, thank you very much. Dr. Sawaro Kunzua, you listened to Afam Osigwe explain there. From your perspective, what do you think are the proper boundaries for the various arms of government? In this case, the legislature and say the executive or even the judiciary. When, in your opinion, will the legislature be seen to be overreaching itself in exercise of its multifarious powers? It does appear that we're having some audio challenge there with our Benin Network Center. Once our engineers clear that up, we'll return to Dr. Sawaro Kunzua, who is in the studios there. But let's pop the question to Professor Maxwell Gidado. Professor Maxwell Gidado, of course, in jurisprudence, there's a concept of legislative judgment and so on and so forth. But from your perspective, when can it be said that the legislature has overreached itself or is overreaching itself with the possibility of some greater friction with the executive or judicial branch of governments, or branches of governments?
It is very obvious that there are instances that the legislature could be said to have overstepped, its bounds. A typical example could be, we mentioned the issue of this power of arrest and the power to summon any public officer or any Nigerian, to come to the precincts or of the assembly, state or national, for furtherance or in furtherance of the exercise of its legislative functions. Now, a good example is if a legislator has an altercation with either a minister or any public official, and now brings it on the floor of the House and decides to use that as an opportunity to get back at that minister or that public officer by having him to be summoned to come. This is something that perhaps was just personal between the two of you. You quarreled, you had an altercation somewhere, and you said, I'll take it up on this person. You now come and raise the matter up on the floor and raised a motion or a resolution that says he should be invited, only for him to come, and you know very well that that is not in line with what the Constitution as well as the rules governing how a public officer can be summoned or invited to come to the House. That would be an abuse of legislative powers, because the Constitution as well as the rules governing how this is to be carried out is spelled out clearly. It must be with bias to what is specifically within the powers of the National Assembly to do so. And that is where I am also very, very scary about resolutions of the National Assembly being given a teeth. Because I liken it to a situation where Nigerians are clamoring for state police. The governors might abuse, state police. That same fear can be attributed to resolutions of the House, or the House getting that power to summon anybody on a flimsy excuse or on trying to scuttle or to settle scores, within them. Definitely this will be a big cause for acrimony, and it would also bring about a relationship, a very acrimonious relationship between the executive and the legislature, or even if it's someone involved in the other third arm, which is the judiciary. They should use it sparingly, and they should also use it judiciously within the premise of what the law states that can be used, particularly in the exercise of these oversight functions.
All right, Professor Gidado, thanks a lot. Distinguished Senator Nala, your thoughts on when the legislature can be deemed to have overreached itself?
Okay, can I quickly make one correction? There is nowhere in a democracy where the government, that is the executive, possesses the right to impose tax on citizens, because every tax should be provided for by law. When the public decided that they wanted democracy, I have always said it, it is because everyone wants to go to bed and wake up with some reasonable degree of certainty as to what is going to happen to him within the envelope of what is provided by the Constitution and the law. So if you have any executive waking up tomorrow and saying this is it, that is illegal. That is unlawful. That's on one side. On the other side, the barometer for you to determine whether a legislator is overreaching himself or not is to go back to the oath of office he has taken as a member of the National Assembly. One, to do justice to all manner of people, without fear or favor, affection or ill will. And the second most important, that I will not allow my personal interest to affect my official conduct and decision. So the moment you use this barometer, it is very, very easy for you to determine whether a legislature is overreaching itself in the exercise of its powers under the Constitution. Now, a lot of people don't understand. Because of the multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic configuration of this country, mutual suspicion, valid mutual suspicion exists. Now, in order to remove those mutual suspicions, the framers of our Constitution, in their wisdom, decided to constitute the National Assembly in such a manner that nothing will pass the floor of the House of Representatives and the Senate in such a manner as to place one tribe over the other, or one ethnic group over the other, or one religion over the other. That is the idea. So if the legislature is exercising its powers, it is because for every committee of the National Assembly, whether in the House or in the Senate, you will have seen that these geopolitical zones are clearly represented. And as it relates to the power of disbursement, Nigeria is the only democracy where the National Assembly has been vested with the power to alter budget proposal of the executive. And the reason is simple. The framers of our Constitution are thinking that in our journey to nation building, we might run into some unfortunate circumstances where, for example, you will say Balana Allah is the president. And I say, okay, since I know that the National Assembly cannot alter my budget, 75% of the resources of this country should go to the northwestern state where I come from. Now, in order to prevent that, that's why that power has been specifically vested with the National Assembly to say, no, please. We have to take the sensibilities of people into account. This percentage should go to this percentage should go to this. But in the overall, again, the National Assembly is compelled to take into account that the topography of the country is different. So, for example, if there is a proposal for 400 million to make road between Kaduna and Abuja, it is equally important for the National Assembly to understand the fact that that same amount cannot do road in Bayelsa and the rest. So the framers of our Constitution had all this at the back of their mind when they made these provisions.
All right, distinguished Senator Onala, thank you very much. Senator Mamora at Lagos Network Studios. When, in your opinion, is the practice of checks and balances deemed, to have been abused in terms of cross-boundary interference by the legislature into the executive or judicial terrain, and therefore legislative overreach?
Thank you very much. I think because of this tendency for overreach, quote and unquote, as you have put it, that is why, for me, I caution against taking this issue of separation of powers too far. And what do I mean? I'm saying that, yes, separation of powers within the ambit of the constitutionally assigned rules of the various arms of government, the executive, the legislature, the judiciary. There are certain functions that are clear, which they are not ambiguous. But rather, I would say, rather than, hammering on this separation, I prefer to talk about interdependence for good governance. and particularly between the executive and the legislature, no bird flies with one wing, because most of the time this overreach, what have you, tends to occur between the executive and the legislature. That is why every time, all the time, I advocate communication, consultation, cooperation, and collaboration, particularly between the executive and the legislature. Now, again, the Constitution is clear. So each arm of government has to work within the ambit of those clearly stated rules. Happy Afam, in his contribution earlier on, did say, even in Section 88, under power of investigation, it's very clear what the Constitution says there. I think under 88 subsection 2, that the powers, subsections 1 and 2, that the powers to conduct this investigation will be exercisable only for the purpose of lawmaking. And in so doing, of course, to enable the National Assembly to expose corruption, inefficiency, and waste. And even prior to that, it says that it has to be, that has been tested in the court, that it must have been published in the House Journal or the official Gazette. So these are requirements, so to speak. But once you have all those things I mentioned earlier on, consultation, communication, effective communication, and of course you have this cooperation and you have this collaboration, then the tendency for misunderstanding of roles will be highly reduced, believing that, of course, we are all working towards common goal, which is the good of the people. So once we take all this on board, this tendency for overreach, as you put it, will be highly reduced, if not totally eliminated. You cannot, it happens even in the democracies that have been there for so long, you still have this disagreement, but at the end of the day, any disagreement should be sorted out with the interest of the people at mind. I mean, because at the end of the day, that is what you're really working for. That is the good of the people. So you must be able to still come to terms for the benefit of the people.
All right, Senator Olorununbe Mabumara, thank you very much. Gentlemen, just as is expected, there are already reactions to our discussion this morning, and we would like to take the tweets as sent in by our viewers. We start off with that of Daniel Munachimson. It says, the legislature wield great power in governance and administration. They play a pivotal role in speaking for the people. And he continues, it's quite preposterous and unpalatable how presidential appointees can be recalcitrant and defiant to the voice of the assembly.
And then we have another tweet from Muhammad Jamil Sadara. It says, to enhance accountability. Now, the legislative arm of government lacks this in all senses, perhaps the major setback of our democracy since 1999.
SMB Johnson. National Assembly is a critical arm of government. However, current intrigues characterizing National Assembly made it troublesome and undesirable.
And then we have this from Dele Jack Solomon. It says the constitutional powers of the second arm of government can't be overemphasized. They lost respect because of individual personalities. By the way, the legislature is the first arm. That's Section 4, and then Section 5, Executive, Section 6, Judiciary.
From Akintunde Kende, said Assembly has the power to do and undo.
All right, and then we have another tweet from Daniel Munachimso. It says the executive arm of government has recently been nonchalant about the current recalcitrance of its appointees that has appeared before the National Assembly.
From Quadri Olajide, it is not about the power, but the person behind the use of the power. Nigeria is not lawless, but the makers are perceived outlaws.
And then SMB Johnson again, it says the National Assembly must not be bullied and destabilized because its oversight function is sacrosanct for the attainment of good governance.
Dele Jack Solomon, since 1999, the Nigerian legislature has been involved in internal and external war vendetta, using their oversight powers and function.
And Suleiman Zuntu tweets, the 8th Assembly shouldn't constitute a clog in the wheel of progress. The power of oversight stops at and within the provisions of extant laws.
Festus Akimboyewa, legislators should remove the log in their own eyes before they can effectively perform any oversight functions of the executive branch.
And then we have this from Hamza Dande. It tweets, we need a unicameral legislature and channel the resources for development purpose. As such, the Senate should be scrapped.
Ortega Esemwede, separation of power is very important and helpful to strengthen democracy. Otherwise, there will be abuse of power by presidents.
And then Michael Markoji has this tweet. It says the 1999 Constitution empowers the National Assembly to investigate any erring executive, but it's really unfortunate that this has been lately abused.
Law Alpha C. The National Assembly is all-encompassing, as representing the interests and heartbeat of Nigerians. So, the oversight is germane and apt. And
Akimboyewa has this tweet, Festus, says Senator Naala proudly quoted sections 88 and 89 of the 1999 Constitution. Truth is, what legislators have been doing is finger-pointing and second-guessing.
Kayode Ogunlowo, I don't believe in oversight function of the National Assembly and its effectiveness, but it's pure envelope oversight.
All right, those are some of the tweets that we have in the meantime from our viewers. We understand that the audio snag to our Benin Network Center has been cleared. Dr. Osawaro Kunzua, if you can hear us, I'm sure you'll also be monitoring the contributions of the other 4 guests, 3 here with us in Abuja as well as in Lagos. Let's get your thoughts very quickly, including some of the reactions from the tweets. Is there a sense in which the legislature in Nigeria, you could take it from the state level or right up to the more prominent national level, the legislature has been overreaching itself? Has there been unnecessary cross-boundary conflict, all in the name of checks and balances?
Well, there have been instances where people will be entitled to feeling so, but it's going to be very difficult to define as well. The good intention of the lawmakers will be their redeeming protection at the end of the day. But I think we should not do anything to hobble the National Assembly. We should let them express themselves. And where they seem to be flowing into a kind of foreign territory or a territory that is not allocated to them, we can resort to the judiciary for a proper definition of the boundaries. So we shouldn't do anything to rein them in. We need a National Assembly, as many commentators have said, both within the studio and outside, that the National Assembly is the very symbol and probably the bulwark of our democracy. We have to encourage the National Assembly to come of age on account of the disruptions they have suffered over time. So to that extent, they should carry on. They took an oath. We should all be watching them. And whenever any person believes that the National Assembly is overextending itself, can either go to court or probably resort to the court of public opinion as is taking place now as well. But we should encourage the National Assembly to be up to its billing at all times. That's what I should say.
Okay, Professor, still with, Dr. Okunza, I beg your pardon, still with you. Now, one of the speakers here actually pointed out the issue of being misunderstood, as in the legislative and being misunderstood most of the time. Now, the legislature, as we all know, said to be the lubricant oil, or the lubricant that will oil the wheel of democratic governance. Now, it's either the lubrication is functional, or lubrication is functional or dysfunctional, and the squeaky noise that which we get to hear is what is irritating for the people. Why is it so difficult to actually communicate this aspect of legislation actually with the people, understanding them, and what exactly needs to be done?
Well, what needs to be done is more communication and correction of existing perception. The National Assembly occasionally is perceived as being distant, being arrogant, and being irrelevant. Just somebody was suggesting that we scrap the Senate. I would disagree. Most of these things are hidden levers of protection. Democracy is supposed to be an intricate form of government, and it's to protect against tyranny, essentially. So most of these hidden devices don't come to the fore until there is a crisis, until they are needed. But that is no excuse for distinguished lawmakers not paying attention to public opinion, because each time they appear to overreach, they actually detract from their own prestige, they detract from their gravitas, and in the process corrode their authority. If somebody is calling for a thing to be scrapped, it means that person doesn't have any confidence in the institution at all. So our lawmakers will do us well. All Nigerians will be done the service if any person who is privileged to be a lawmaker takes his role very, very seriously. We expect our National Assembly to be devoted to the welfare of Nigerians at all times. Of course, there will be conflicts. We expect each time the National Assembly is going into battle, it is in furtherance of the welfare of Nigerians. We don't expect our National Assembly to be bogged down too frequently in sterile stalemates. The National Assembly is supposed to be a sacred institution. It's all agreed that that is the very symbol of democracy, that is the engine of national policy, that is the place for elite discussion, a center for our pluralism, a center for expressing our diversity in a constructive way. So all our lawmakers are bound, at least morally, to recognize that fact and give the very best impression of themselves in the eyes of those who voted them into office. I think that is going to be the ultimate remedy. And because each lawmaker comes from a constituency, they should invest more effort in explaining whatever they are doing on the floor of National Assembly to their constituents. And when you aggregate all this, I'm sure the perception will become more and more favorable. That is the way forward. There isn't going to be any kind of magic bullet to be shot about it at all. You know, is to keep working at it. And then for the Nigerians, we also need to support our National Assembly in spite of their shortcomings. We need to support them. I would ordinarily see our National Assembly the way it is vis-a-vis other arms of government as a toddler learning to walk. So we should stabilize the National Assembly even in a kind of unsteady gait, so that in a short while it should go from just walking unsteadily to marching forward with confidence and then serve us well, because we need to protect our democracy, protect our liberty, and all the freedoms already apportioned to us.
All right, Dr. Sawaro Kunzwa, thank you very much there for your insights. Well, gentlemen, one other point that we should consider at this stage has to do with the direct consequence of the exercise of the manifold powers of the legislature. As it's been indicated, the legislature can interrogate, it can investigate. Of course, you know, you have procedures for doing all of that. Either summon or you issue a warrant of arrest, as Professor Gidado has already indicated. So, you exercise your powers and then you make pronouncements. So what? In other words, what is the potency of pronouncements made by the legislature other than laws that have been validly passed by way of bills assented to by Mr. President or Mr. Governor, Afam Osigwe? So you have all kinds of resolutions: fire XYZ, remove XYZ, you know, and so on and so forth. What is the potency?
Now, my take is that resolutions by the legislature should not be trifled with. But then, where it is seen that the legislature has overstepped its bounds, we may have a problem with complying with such resolutions. And the point has to be made that if the legislature is to play its role of being a bulwark against tyranny and oppression in the society and preventing the emergence of a dictatorship, it should not be weakened. As an institution, it should not be ridiculed by appointees of the executive or by the executive itself as an organ of government. Resolutions rightly arrived at by the legislation which expose inefficiency, waste, and corruption in government should be implemented by the executive. Now, you may have what may appear to be usurpation of functions where the legislature would appear to personalize issues or insist that a particular person be sacked from his office, which is ordinarily the prerogative of the legislature, of the executive. There you may have a problem. The executive may see that as an infringement or a encroachment on its areas of competence or authority, and the executive may not be willing to give in to that, because if he gives in to that, the legislature may well determine who retains his office, who gets and then who gets dismissed, and no right-thinking or self-respecting executive would want to quickly rush to dismiss a person because the legislature has recommended. But my take on it is that the legislature, in the exercise of its investigative functions, can make certain adverse findings against a political appointee or against an appointee of the executive and make its findings known to the executive and leave it to take appropriate decision in the circumstance, and may even go further to recommend criminal investigation. But if we constantly get resolution by the executive calling that certain persons be dismissed, that is why I may have a problem, and I would think that the executive may not take that kindly to that. Now, I expressed this view in this studio the other day, and I said if I were the Senate, I would not have called for the resignation of the CG of Customs, but I would have deprecated his conduct and listed reasons why he may not be a fit and proper person to hold that office, and leave the executive to draw the conclusion. But where there is an insistence that a particular person, officer, be relieved of his functions, then allegations or suspicion or fears of encroachment or usurpation of executive powers may arise, and naturally there will be a resistance. There will be a resistance to comply with such a resolution. Now, on the issue of Mago of saying sack him, my take on it is that if the Senate, using that as an example, has refused to confirm him, it means he ceases to be. There's no need to sack him. It is simply for the executive to respect that and cease to accord him recognition in that regard. Saying sack him would appear to suggest that he rightly occupies that position as a confirmed executive chairman of the EFCC. So I think sometimes too, how these things are handled will determine what kind of result is achieved. If it is handled in such a manner that the legislation would appear to be on rampage, forgive my choice of use of that word, but for want of a better word, for be on rampage and dictating to the executive who retains its position and who does not retain it, then you may see an increasing number of refusal by the executive to sack such persons.
All right, but Mazi, thank you very much. This interplay in this process, yes. Senator Nala.
Let me quickly, with the greatest respect, correct my distinguished brother and friend. You see, there is no resolution of the Senate that said that executive should sack person. No. Normally what is being done, and you can see the recent happening in the United States of America, where the parliament said the Attorney General should resign. And whenever a resolution of the legislature, but in Nigeria, let me particularly to National Assembly, is reached, what the executive is under obligation to know is that it is the entire 170 million Nigerians communicating. These are representatives of the people elected by the people. So when there is a resolution, it is not about the members of the parliament, no. It is that it's 170 million Nigerians speaking through their representative to say that certain things be done. So it will be contemptuous of the population of Nigeria for the executive to begin to think that it's the legislature. It doesn't work that way. When the parliament in the United States of America decided that Flynn should resign, all they did was a resolution. And it is expected that responsible citizens of this country should understand the fact that it is the United States of America entirely that is speaking through its representative. And you saw what happened. So we cannot practice democracy and begin to particularize it and think that our own is different. It's not different. The whole idea, let me tell you, the whole idea is that rightly or wrongly, a decision has been reached democratically. And I have always told you that democracy is a recent suspicion whereby more than half the people are right more than half the time. So in that representative capacity, either in the Senate or House of Representatives, votes are taken. So if the majority of the opinion that certain positions remain the position of the parliament, that is it. There is nothing anybody can do about that. And I have, again, honestly, somebody asked me, why are you dealing with, he mentioned a particular person. I said, look, we are not looking at that person as that senator. No. We are looking at the entire people who voted him to come and represent them. Yeah. I don't know whether you understand. So you cannot sit down in parliament and say, no, because Maxwell Gidado is so this, we are not going to listen to him. No. You are shutting the entire population of that senatorial district or that House of Representatives constituency that voted him.
All right. Well, distinguished Senator, thanks. Let's quickly go over to Senator Mamora. Senator Mamora, we had the experience in the 7th Assembly. There was some resolution calling for the removal from office of the then Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Ms. Aruma Ote, but she stayed put, and there were also reports that her commission was starved of funds. But essentially what we are talking about has to do with the potency of resolutions. I know you earlier cited what we now, of course, can refer to as the locus classicus for respect of resolutions, namely the doctrine of necessity. But in most cases, some people have the feeling that some of these resolutions come rather too frequently, usually in torrents, and the executive simply looks the other way. What should be the proper reaction to legislative resolutions?
Yes, again, thank you very much. The first thing to say is that there has to be what I call institutional respect. That is, there has to be mutual respect among the arms of government, the judiciary, the legislature, the executive. That institutional respect is very, very key. It's important for good governance. But having said that, again, I need to say that ordinarily, and I think we will understand that, ordinarily, resolutions are seen as advisory in nature. But it behoves on practitioners in the system to also, based on the institutional respect I mentioned, to see the need to take note of resolutions when they are passed. Now, I do know of some parliaments where they go further to give more teeth to resolution by making it what is called a binding resolution. Even at the United Nations, they have binding resolutions. And usually binding resolutions will be such that will have 2/3 majority support from the parliament. Because what you need to override the veto of the executive, either the governor, the state, or the president, is 2/3 of the members of the parliament. So some people even enact, and we try to do that during our time in the Senate. We tried, unfortunately we couldn't get it through. We didn't conclude it. That is, putting in place binding resolution, now having the force of law, because the resolution is not a law. But when you take it further to now enact a law, but for a binding resolution, it becomes something else. It now has the force of law. Then it's no longer a resolution. But be that as it may, I think moderation is also key. And that's why I also said earlier on, there has to be synergy. When I mention communication, cooperation, collaboration and all that, these are elements that will help to foster good governance and, of course, the good of the people. As I can't agree, if I have always argued that representation is the most important role of a legislator. Representation, because people are elected to go and represent the entire people of the land, and particularly in the Senate, where you have representation based on equality. That's why you have 3. So, which means no state feels shortchanged in any way, because there's equality of representation. Unlike the House of Representatives, where you have representation based on population. But the Senate is also a stabilizing factor, and of course, they tend to be more matured, greater maturity is expected. It usually has more people who have been have had the privilege to have attained so much in the course of their career, even before coming to the Senate. So all this have to come into play. There has to be moderation so that there won't be heating up, so to speak, of the polity in the interest of the people, because where two elephants fight, as they say, it is the grass that suffers. So as much as possible, yes, even in pushing for resolution. I listened to the debate yesterday in the Senate, on the floor of the Senate, where, of course, you could see some voice of moderation, trying to, just, bring the temperature, as it were, bring it down. And again, I must say at this point that, you see, the parliament, generally, should also try as much as possible to make use of its committees more, because you see, we say this, that the parliament in plenary is parliament on show. Some people will say some people are playing to the gallery. I don't even have a problem with that. That's one of the reasons why the parliament is, why the gallery is there. You can play to the gallery, it doesn't matter. But I'm saying that we always talk of committee system. The committee should be allowed to function more, so that more also can be achieved. The parliament in plenary is parliament on show. The parliament in committees is parliament at work. So more work is done, and of course there's a better, control of emotions at the committee level rather than at the plenary. So more work should be allowed to be done and more to be achieved at the committee level. So these are some of the things that could limit the tendency to maybe get a little bit, excited and all that. With all due respect to my colleagues, I'm only saying that it's in all our own interest to moderate ourselves as much as possible, and of course, so that we don't also give people the opportunity for wrong perception, because perception matters. We don't want people to have a wrong perception of what the parliament is trying to achieve at a given point in time.
All right, thank you very much, Senator Olorunwebe Mamora, former Speaker, Lagos State House of Assembly, and former Senate Deputy Leader. Thank you so much for your insights on the conversation this morning. Gentlemen, because we need to oil this wheel of broadcasts, so we'll take a break to bring some messages, and we'll go on the home stretch for the conversation and the program indeed this morning. Go on a break.
Vote for me, and I will turn night into day.
Vote me, I will ban for more importation. Everybody will start eating turkey and chicken.
Put me in power, and I will bring winter to West Africa.
I will turn all the taxi into plane.
Campaign promises. Another hilarious episode of Professor John Bull, your rib-cracking comedy. Find out the true gist of election violence, betrayals, and promises as Olani goes head-to-head with Udo.
You have money. Who you mean?
Showing at 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday and Friday on NTA Network International and Star Times.
By the time I become the chairman, I will make you my special advisor.
Why not go make me money advisor?
What is wrong with you, my daughter? That is why people will look at politicians as thieves.
Over and out. Brought to you by Glow.
Welcome to the news speed.
Most people abandon this road. They don't take this road again. As a matter of fact, now people now prefer taking this road because of how smooth and nice it is now.
is a rescue mission project. Invest in Imo. The Imo Rescue Mission. Imo must be better.
To the outer framers, the hat tippers, the fringe growers, you don't need to hide anymore. Try Dettol Even Tone. It cleans and helps to reduce the appearance of blemishes caused by oil, dirt and germs, giving your skin a healthy feel for an even better you. Dettol, be 100% sure.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 Naira only.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, just before we get the closing thoughts of our other guests, let's read again some of the reactions that have come in from our viewers. We still have this from Festus Akimboyewa. Legislators have been behaving like ombudsmen and encroaching on the power of the executive branch, all in the name of oversight, which, in his opinion, is unlawful.
Franklin Ofoma says the oversight powers have been turned to conduit for corruption. The powers vesting on them now is power for kickbacks and result, budget failures.
Abolade Salame tweets, oversight power of the legislature overseeing abandoned projects.
Sani Michael Omakoji, honorable member, well, we have a senator here. Can you tell Nigerians on this station those investigations that have been ever concluded by the National Assembly since 1999?
And Dele Jack Solomon again says, all right, the oversight power is conferred to expose corruption, inefficiency, or waste in the executive branch, but Nigerians are yet to see this done.
Festus as this one, the legislature continues to violate the principle of separation of powers by trying to perform some of the functions of the executive.
Franklin Ofoma, legislative oversight is now being used for infighting. With a vibrant legislature, Nigeria would have been an economic powerhouse.
Signing Michael Omakoji again tweets, we've seen in this nation where powerful politicians have refused to honor the National Assembly's invitation, and nothing has happened thereafter.
And then we have this from Safiyanu Jibril. I want Senator Mamora to give reasons why the National Assembly is the most misunderstood government institution in Nigeria, as he said. Unfortunately, we've already signed him up, but we still have Senator Ibn Naala here. He says, give reasons why the National Assembly is the most misunderstood government institution in Nigeria today.
Okay, from Ibrahim Shehu Kuso, this Senate is not for us, but against us. Using the institution to fight personal battles is not good for our democracy.
Okay, you know, that's where we have a praise tweet coming in from here. It said that it's chosen NTA over others, that NTA GMN, of course, that's the Good Morning Nigeria, is discussing very important issues. That's from Wale. And then we have this one from Kenny Wole Oshineye. It says, oversight function is not a problem, but the recklessness of the National Assembly has really become a theater of the absurd and must be checked.
And from Clifford, we have this one. The three arms of government are supposed to be coordinates with implied functional specificity as appropriate.
And then we have this from Mawai Yabo. It says, I'm behind the National Assembly, even though they have issues also, because they have spread representation throughout the country.
Amiyao Abdullah says, please ask them to answer the question. When are they deemed to have overstepped their bounds?
And Jide Mutiu tweets, you know, democracy makes provision for the separation of powers to enable checks and balances in government. Now, the 8th Assembly should be careful of overreach. All right, those are the tweets that we are taking in the meantime from our viewers. Let's quickly go to our Benin Network Center again. Dr. Osawaro Kunzua, let's get your closing thoughts on this. With regard, again, to the potency of the resolution of the National Assembly, are these resolutions being passed in vain? And if so, what should the National Assembly do?
They ought to be passed with a lot of persuasive powers. But just like our compatriots have said, I think the intention, when the intention doesn't appear to be issuing from good faith, then the moral stature of the institution is actually diminished. That is the challenge we have there. But having said that, I think we need a National Assembly. We will need all our lawmakers to be more circumspect, and all Nigerians also should find it a bounden duty to support the National Assembly as a very symbol of our democracy. So we have to encourage our lawmakers to be more attuned to public opinion, and quite a lot of opinions we have received this morning. I'm sure our distinguished senators in the studio would have taken note, and they also need to institute a proper mechanism for listening to Nigerians over and above their constituency channels.
Sawaro Okonzua, Public Affairs Analyst, thank you very much for your insight on the program this morning. You joined us from our Benin studio.
Thank you.
All right, Professor Gidado, going forward, really, we said a lot all day, but there is a need to actually reinvent what we should do to actually ensure that the arms of government move on to self-democracy as it ought to be. What do you suggest?
I entirely agree with the premise you're looking at, because there ought to be a very healthy relationship between the legislature and the executive. I liken them to be like two elephants fighting, like one of our colleagues like to say. It's the grass that suffers. So, and what baffles me most is we have a ruling party that has the majority, in this National Assembly. There are some of these issues that they ought to settle it themselves, settle it within the party, within the leadership, and not come out and give us this acrimony. It's hitting the polity, and it doesn't all go well. We don't want Nigerians to look at the two arms as if they're fighting, as if there is something, fundamentally wrong. It doesn't give a good taste. Rather, let like this issue of resolutions. Now, a situation where for the past 15 months, I've noticed there have been 6 resolutions passed inviting officers to come to the National Assembly, and they've refused to come. That doesn't leave, or failed to come. Yes, that doesn't leave a good taste. And it shouldn't be the impression. That is one of the reasons that I'm saying that the legislature is the most misunderstood arm of government. So if this sort of obeying of, or the disobedience to resolutions that are passed by the highest lawmaking body of a country, you give that impression to the younger ones coming. They'll grow with that impression that if anything comes up from this, if a senator invites you to come, all you need to do is just don't go. It's a very bad precedent, and it should be stopped. Let there be a very harmonious relationship between the two arms.
Okay. Professor Maxwell Gidado, Faculty of Law, Nasarawa State University, thank you for being part of our discussion this morning.
My pleasure.
And then the Deputy Senate Leader, Senator Ibn Nala, your closing thoughts. Senator Mamora said use the showpiece less, that's to say the plenary, and then concentrate more on committee work, committee activities where most of the work is done. But Professor Gidado, before we signed him off a moment ago, was also talking about the instrumentality of political parties. We saw this same infighting when PDP was in power. APC is in office now, and it continues. What can the party do to rein in its members at caucus stage, before the linen, whether filthy or otherwise clean, is spread out in your showroom?
Well, normally, the assumption is that the party in government will have the direction of the government in power, and therefore its representation in the National Assembly should equally toe along that line. That is under normal circumstances. But you see, like I have said, we have a problem where only one person is elected in the entire executive arm of government, and that is the president. And then, of course, because they have joint ticket with the vice president, they remain there. Any other person is an appointee. But individually, every member of the 360 members of the House of Reps is elected by a constituency. And so it is with the senators. So the question of accountability and how to balance that accountability with your loyalty to the party and loyalty to the government is a problem. And normally, because the party is overwhelmingly voted by Nigerian people, if there is a policy direction of government into which the party, the members elected at Koto, will not have this kind of problems. So my take on it is that they will continue to misunderstand the legislature, because the legislature is an elected, accountable arm of government to the people, nearest to the people. Other people, ministers carry orderlies and all this kind of thing. To even get to them is a problem. But you must go back to your constituency. Every other person must have access to you and tell you his feelings. And therefore, to convey those feelings will definitely run counter to somebody who has not had the opportunity to even get to the people. And that is the correct position.
Deputy Senate Leader Nala, we thank you so much for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
you. Mazi Osikwe, what is most critical moving forward? There are drawbacks, no doubt.
Sure, there are drawbacks. For me, what is most critical is that no arm of government or agent, persons in the employer appointment of government should put out in the media information intended to tarnish or diminish the standing of an organ of government or its officers, to make it look as if the government is at war. All hands must be on deck. All members of the different organs of government must work together to improve the economy and make Nigeria a better place. The infighting is unnecessary, and the party in power should also act as a clearinghouse to get some of these issues sorted out, so that whichever elephant is in the room should be carefully led out of the room, so that Nigeria will be a better place for it.
Former Secretary General, Nigerian Bar Association, Mazi Osigwe, thank you so much for your insight as well on the program. And that's it with our conversation, taking a look at the oversight function of powers of the legislature. We appreciate your time. And we'll just be right on time to take a look at the weather prospects for the rest of today.
Welcome to the weather forecast.